You sit down with your textbook. Coffee's ready, notes are organized, you've blocked out 3 hours because that's what serious students do. And 15 minutes in, you're reading the same paragraph for the 4th time, your mind's somewhere else entirely, and you start to wonder if maybe you're just not built for this. Maybe you're lazy. Maybe everyone else has some secret you weren't given. But here's what nobody tells you. The reason studying feels impossible isn't because you lack discipline. It's because almost everything you've been taught about learning is designed for a brain that doesn't exist. We've built an entire educational mythology around the idea that good students are the ones who can sit still the longest, that retention comes from repetition, that if you just focus harder, push through the resistance, spend more hours, eventually the information will stick. And when it doesn't, when your attention scatters after 20 minutes and you can't recall what you read yesterday, you assume the problem is you. The stereotype says effective learners are disciplined, patient, methodical. They highlight in neat colors. They reread their notes. They study for hours at a time. The reality is that most of what we call studying is actually just performance. It's doing the things that look like learning because we've been told that's what learning looks like. Meanwhile, your brain is barely encoding anything at all. There's a concept in cognitive psychology called illusions of competence. It was studied extensively by researchers like Jeffrey Carpike, and what they found changes everything. When you reread something, when you review your highlighted notes, your brain experiences a sensation of fluency. The material feels familiar, and you mistake that familiarity for understanding. You think you know it because you recognize it. But recognition and recall are completely different processes. One is passive, the other requires your brain to actively reconstruct information, and that's where actual learning happens. This matters because it means most people are spending hours doing things that create the feeling of productivity while building almost nothing permanent in their memory. They're stuck in what feels like learning but is really just recognition dressed up as knowledge. So what does studying fast actually mean? It doesn't mean reading faster or working longer. It means understanding how your brain actually encodes information and stopping everything that doesn't serve that process. Think of your memory like a forest path. If you walk the same route over and over, the path becomes clear. That's what we've been told studying is, repetition wearing down resistance. But that's not quite right. Your brain doesn't just need repetition, it needs disruption. It needs to be forced to find that path again from different starting points, in different conditions, without the comfort of familiarity. That's what creates real, flexible understanding. This is why retrieval practice works, not because it's a hack or a trick, but because it mirrors the way human memory actually evolved. When you force yourself to recall something without looking at your notes, you're not testing what you know, you're building what you know. Every time you retrieve information, you're strengthening the pathway and making it more accessible. Every time you reread, you're just walking past the path, noticing it's there, and assuming that means you can find it later in the dark. The students who seem to learn impossibly fast aren't doing more. They're doing less, but doing it right. They're not sitting for 6 hours. They're studying in short, intensely focused bursts where their brain is actually working. 30 minutes of active retrieval where you're testing yourself, explaining concepts out loud, writing from memory, will encode more information than 3 hours of passive review. It's not even close. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Take a moment and ask yourself honestly, when you study, how much of that time is actually learning and how much is just being around the material? How much is checking the box, performing the ritual, giving yourself permission to feel like you tried? There's no judgment in that question. We all do it. It's human. Sometimes we study because we're anxious and studying feels like action. Sometimes we study because we think we should, not because we're actually ready to engage. And sometimes we avoid the methods that actually work because they're uncomfortable. Retrieval practice feels harder than rereading. It exposes what you don't know. It requires you to struggle. So we choose the thing that feels productive instead of the thing that produces results.
But if you're someone who genuinely wants to learn, not just pass, not just perform, but actually understand, you have to be willing to separate the appearance of studying from the reality of it. The writer Montaigne said that learning without thought is labor lost. He was right, but not in the way most people interpret it. It's not about thinking harder, it's about thinking differently. It's about recognizing that effort and effectiveness aren't the same thing, that you can work incredibly hard and learn almost nothing if you're working in the wrong direction. In Japanese craftsmanship, there's a concept called muda, wasted effort, motion without purpose. A master can do in one cut what an apprentice does in 10, because they understand where to apply force and where to let the material guide them. Studying is the same. The students who learn fastest have figured out where their effort actually matters and stopped wasting energy everywhere else. So what does this look like practically? It means studying in shorter sessions. It means testing yourself constantly, even when you're not ready. It means spacing your practice over days instead of cramming it into one night. It means making retrieval difficult on purpose, closing the book, trying to explain the concept to an empty room, writing out everything you remember, and only then checking what you missed. It means letting go of the comfort of familiarity and accepting that real learning feels like controlled forgetting and remembering. You forget just enough that retrieval takes effort. Then you force your brain to reconstruct what it knew. And each time you do that, the knowledge becomes yours in a way it never could through passive exposure. The neuroscientist James McGaugh spent decades studying memory formation, and what he found is that the brain prioritizes information that requires effort to process. Not arbitrary difficulty, not suffering for the sake of suffering, but meaningful cognitive load. When your brain has to work to understand something, when it has to make connections and fill in gaps, it signals that this information matters, that it's worth the metabolic cost of storing it permanently. This is why students who seem naturally gifted aren't usually smarter. They've just figured out, whether consciously or not, that learning is about strategic struggle. They make things harder for themselves in precisely the ways that build understanding, and easier for themselves by eliminating everything that doesn't. You can study for 3 hours and retain almost nothing, or you can study for 45 minutes in a way that actually changes your brain. The difference isn't willpower, it's understanding what you're optimizing for. And maybe that's the real insight here. The reason studying feels illegal when you do it right isn't because you found some loophole. It's because you've stopped confusing activity with progress. You've stopped performing learning and started doing it. And in a world that's built entire systems around the performance, that feels like breaking the rules. The truth is simpler than the mythology. Your brain wants to learn. It's designed for it. But it needs you to work with how it actually functions, not against it. It needs you to stop measuring success in hours spent and start measuring it in whether you can recall, explain, and apply what you've learned without the crutch of familiarity. That's what studying fast really means. Not rushing, not skimming, but recognizing that most of what you've been doing isn't learning at all, and having the quiet confidence to do something different. If this changed how you think about learning, the next video explores what happens when you try to learn too many things at once, and why your brain might be better at it than you think. And after that, we'll look at why some people seem to remember everything they read, while others forget by the next day. Not because of some genetic advantage, but because of a few small differences in how they engage with information. But that's for next time.